All right, thank you again, everyone, for being here. My name is Robert Bruce. I'm the state director with Maryland Science Olympiad. We're here giving another Scilympiad seminar, and one that's a bit exciting because we just announced that several of our regional tournaments are in person. So we're going to actually see our students for the first time in several years, which will be awesome. We are still heavily utilizing the Scilympiad platform, even when we're in person in tournaments. So this seminar will be highly useful and still relevant towards how we're running regionals for this year. I'm saying the word regional a lot, mostly because this is going to focus on how regional tournaments are going. Our state tournament is still finalizing all of their logistics, so I will let that be a part of future communications. But since it impacts more people talking about regionals anyways, I'm going to show the Scilympiad platform, show how it works, and give a chance for any questions that anybody in the call has. So with that, I'm mostly going to be sharing my screen for most of the seminar, and most of the time I will be on the Scilympiad site itself. So let's start talking about Scilympiad. This is our website for the year. Please note the URL, which is scilympiad.com/MD. If you've competed in invitationals throughout the season, you will be going to a different site than what you went to for your invitationals. But for the regional and the state tournaments in Maryland this year, this is the site you'll want to go to, and please make sure your kids know this URL. It's the number one problem we have on tournament day, where the kids say we can't find our tests. It's because they're at the wrong URL. Most of what I'll talk about is that the fact that this site is somewhat intuitive. There's a lot of guides and a lot of information on this site. Let me go ahead and point out where some of the key information is at this point. The first place I'm actually going to go to is up in this tab here. I'm going to go to Resources and Tournament Documents. What we've tried to do this year is try to post as many documents as we could in the public space that anybody can access. In particular, you'll notice that many of our news and updates are posted here. I'm a few behind in getting them up. But we try to make it accessible for everybody so that even if you're not on the immediate mailing listserv, that you or your students can access the information that we're communicating to teams, basically. There's also schedules, other documents. Highly recommend that you keep this page, know where this page is, and check it periodically. Ultimately, we do try to email these files directly to you and make them accessible, but this is where we try to compile everything otherwise. I'm going to scroll down the page a little bit. You really won't need many of these tabs. The one that you might use is the 2022 Tournament Documents tab, where when it becomes relevant, we'll post documents for each tournament. A little further down, tournament results will be posted. They're kind of in the same subfolder. You can get to them that way as well. We also, if I point to the left side of the page here, we do try to highlight some of the key documents and provide direct links. So our Morgan State Regional is coming up in about a week and a half. So we started posting team numbers, updated schedule, and other various resources. So you can access things directly here as well. So those are kind of some main sources of information on the site. We'll come back to some of the other main buttons. I'll highlight the student dashboard button here. This is how students will access their tests, and I'll show that in a little bit. What I'm going to do right now, though, is kind of go back to the top of the page. Real quick, sorry. The support tab, you are welcome to email us, me, or your tournament directors with questions about Scilympiad. There's also a very fleshed out resource page where you can ask questions directly, which is under the knowledge base. This is literally a Q&A with the site admins who are on a national level. There are some reference guides, so if this seminar is not enough, there are a few written guides on the site, a few tutorial videos, although those are a bit dated at this point. Just things that you can use if you have questions, basically. With that, I'm going to point out now the bar up the top. Let me log out again real quick. When you come onto the site, the first thing you're going to do is, if you're a coach, is log in. I'm going to say this now, and I'll say it again in a few minutes. Students should not create accounts with their email addresses. I will show you in a couple minutes how students access their tests, but any accounts on this site are only for coaches and for volunteers. Students should not be creating accounts. If you are a coach or a volunteer, you'll log in this way, or you'll hit the new member tab. This is, it'll just ask you to create an account. If you're an event supervisor or a volunteer, when you start filling this out, it'll give you one other page just asking for event preferences. Those don't matter. We'll communicate with you about what events you want to run. Just be aware that whatever information it asks for, please make sure to fill it out. Excuse me. And once you've created your account, mine autofills, so you can just simply log in. And now let's move to the top bar here, where this highlights any various roles that you will have with your account. Most of you, if you're a coach, well, every coach will have a coach account, and we'll get to the head coach dashboard in a second. That's how you access your information there. If you're a volunteer, you'll have ES or event supervisor so that you can access event specific information. Score master and director are for our higher level volunteers, so you probably won't have that. But again, this is where you'll access most of the information. With that, I'm going to start diving into the coach portion, which is the head coach dashboard. And for that, I need to be in my coach account. So let me switch here real quick. And now I'm on the head coach dashboard. So this is the main hub for where most of the coach functions will be done on the site. Again, as I'll say a few times, it's rather intuitive. Things tend to be highlighted by the various function type categories. Registration is mostly complete at this point. There is one thing that coaches will be interested in knowing about on here, and that is the invite coaches button. Through this, you can invite co-coaches to help manage your Scilympiad page for your school so that they can complete the tasks that I'm showing you tonight. Also, it puts them onto our mailing list. So if they want to receive direct communications from myself and tournament directors, that is the most immediate way that we can make sure they're on the list. So if you have co-coaches, please make sure they're registered. What I'm really going to focus on today is this compliance tab, because this is your tournament setup. This is how you set up your students to actually take their tests, and arguably are the most important functions that you'll need to know on this site. Going from the top, upload documents I'm going to come back to, because this is where you'll upload your team roster. For now, I'm going to come back to that. And we're going to dive into, again, a very important button here, which is your student team event assignment tab. What this page and these functions are meant to do are for you to add your students to your teams, assign them to their teams if you have multiple teams, assign them to their event, and then generate your signed team roster page, which we require for you to be able to compete. I'll obviously go through those steps one by one, but ultimately, like I said, this is meant for you to set up your team for tournament. Let's start on the page where we're immediately on, which is just the place where you insert all of your students. So on this page, like I said, all of your students will go here. If you have multiple teams, again, the next step is to assign them to teams, but for right now, you will assign them all here. How this works, it's actually really intuitive. All you need to do is just start typing a first name, a last name, and then a grade level, which this is a middle school tournament I'm looking at, so I'll put there in grade 8. Once you have those three, you're going to hit the save changes. And notice that we're going to go from no login ID to having a login ID generated for that student. This is how the students interact with the site, is through these login IDs. So once they're generated, you as a coach are going to want to communicate them to the students. They will create their passwords, as I'll show in a little bit. But again, as I said earlier, students should not create accounts with their emails because they will use these login IDs to interact with the site. So I hope that makes sense. Ultimately, for coaches on this page, you're just going to go through, add all of your students. You can assign them as alternates simply by checking the box literally right here. This page does not particularly utilize the release submitted and registered tabs. So you shouldn't really need to reference these. They're a bit antiquated and we just simply don't use them in Maryland. So as long as they're assigned, have a login ID, and that you've indicated your alternates properly, that's what you need to do on this page. Last thing for me to point out here is simply the coaches are the ones responsible for resetting passwords for students. Please keep that in mind because students can't do it themselves. So my general suggestion here is that coaches either assign students their passwords or that they have a list of passwords for their students, simply because the students can't reset it themselves if they've forgotten. It's easiest if you as a coach, help them to manage that just to have a backup. So that's the student pool. There is a way to import this using a CSV, but it requires a hyper-specific format, and it's my suggestion just to do it manually this way. If you've competed in invitationals, this is something that I believe Julie asked a couple minutes ago. You will need to redo this for your regional tournament. The Scilympiad pages do not transfer from one to another. If you advance to the state tournament, the information will still be there because you'll still be using the Maryland Scilympiad site. But going from invitational to regional, you will need to start over on this site. Just be aware of that. That being said, once you have your students assigned in the pool, we're going to go to students to teams. Everybody's going to have to do this. This is especially relevant if you have multiple teams like I've programmed here. This page is very straightforward. You'll just simply click on the students, add them to the schools that have been registered, or the teams that have been registered, and this literally assigns them to their particular teams. In Maryland, we tend to have Team A, Team B, and Team C, where Team A is your varsity team. Teams B and C, if you have them, are your junior varsity teams. Excuse me, I can answer more questions on those denotations later, but just be aware that's how the setup will probably look. One other quick thing to point out on this page is just simply this little asterisk. I mentioned on the previous page, you can assign alternates to your team. On this assigned students page, any alternates that you have will show up with an asterisk next to the name. That's just how it denotes it. But otherwise, this page is pretty straightforward. So unless anybody has any questions, I'm going to go back to the head coach dashboard and back to student team event assignments and show you one more step, which is students to events. So we've now inputted all of our students. We've assigned them to teams. Now we're going to assign the students to their particular events. This is, again, rather intuitive. All your students will be here. Adding them to their events is simply clicking on the individual boxes. And then I didn't really stress the idea of saving changes on this site, but pretty much everything you need to do will likely involve needing to save the changes. So make sure you save changes as you go. Sometimes it'll prompt you if you forget, but just be aware of that. This page is rather intuitive. This is a simplified version of this page because for regionals, we have specific time blocks which have overlapping events. So to say, for example, if these 4 events were in the same time block, each student would only be allowed to be in one of those events in that time block. And the system used to, at least, block you out from assigning students to too many events, but so that might happen, basically. In fact, if I do this, if I try to assign too many students to an event, it won't let me. One quick thing for me to point out on this page, one event that's different when assigning events is Write It, Do It. How we have to code this event in the system is we have an event called Write It, Do It Writer and Write It, Do It Doer. It's rather intuitive what those refer to. One is for the writer and one is for the doer, but they are separate events. So coaches will need to make sure to assign the writer to the right one and the doer to the right one. Rinse, lather, repeat. If you have multiple teams, you just access them this way. You can export this to Excel, or you can't. I lied. I'm so sorry. There is a spot for that though. But otherwise, once you do that, your students have been assigned to their events and they are now eligible to access the event when it becomes available on tournament day. So I hope that all makes sense. I have talked for a few minutes, so I will give a chance if anybody has any questions on what we've talked about so far. If you have questions, please feel free to keep typing them out. It'll pop up in the chat in a minute. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going. And I'm going to talk about one other extremely important thing on this schedule, on this page. Oh, real quick. Event schedules. That's what I meant to show you before. So if you are on the head coach dashboard, student team event assignment, event schedules, this will show you the breakdown of what students are assigned to which event. You can export that to Excel if you like. It also shows the student number. Andy, can you go through assign student to team again? Sure. So as I mentioned, back on the student pool, we're going to assume that so the first thing is to assign all students to the student pool. This includes if you have multiple teams. Every student ends up in this pool. Put last name, first name, grade. I'll just do it again real quick just to show you. So I'm putting in last name, first name, grade level. Once you hit save changes, it'll give you a login ID, and they're confirmed in the page. Next, we're going to go to students to teams, and that's where you'll see the teams that are newly added to the student pool. You'll simply click on them and add them to the appropriate team over here on the right. If you only have one team, you'll only have one choice, but it's still a needed step to take. So that's how you get students to their teams. Does that kind of cover the question you were asking? Okay. All right. So I mentioned how you get your event schedules if you want them. That's purely optional. What is not optional is this principal certification button. So in Maryland, anybody who's competed before knows that we require a signed team roster that is due before the event. This is our waiver. This is the one form that will ultimately, we cannot let you compete unless you get this form to us. So this is the most important form, really, both for your team as well as on Scilympiad. Unfortunately, this page is a little bit, you can see it's a little hidden under a couple steps, as well as it's not called what you think you want it to call, but it's called the principal certification button. What this does, once you've assigned your students to their teams, you can hit principal certification, and this will generate PDF documents that will have the bare bones of the signed team roster. You'll see that the student names are assigned to the team. It will auto-generate the waiver that you are required to sign. And then the step that you as a coach need to take is you need to have a principal as well as a coach sign this document. I will highlight again, you need to have a principal or school administrator sign the document. I point that out because if you wait till the last second, unless you happen to have your cell phone number for a school admin, you might find yourself scrambling a bit. So please make sure you do this a decent bit in advance of your tournament. If you change students to take different events, you don't need to resubmit this. This is only, and even if you have alternates on your page, if you move alternates to the main team, you don't even need to resubmit this. As long as the right students are on the right teams and we have signatures, you're good to go. And just to highlight real quick, if you do have multiple teams, this document will generate each team as a separate page. So you will do all of them at once. Again, make sure you're aware of this, make sure you do this in advance, and let me show you where to submit it once you're done. To do that, I'm going to go back to the head coach dashboard, and this is where you're going to go to upload documents. This page is rather intuitive. You're just going to simply upload a document. Document type in this case is going to be team roster, and then simply upload it. And once it's over under the uploaded file sign, a side of the page, we have the ability to access it on the tournament side. So I want to stop and give a chance for any questions on that, especially given the importance of this particular form. One quick thing I'll point out, if you're typing questions, please keep typing. A quirk to this site is that it turns off the ability to interact with this upload documents page on tournament day. So our deadline for submission, we cite it at 7 p.m. the day before a tournament. Technically, as long as we have it at the start of the tournament, you're good to go. But please try to have it uploaded by 7 p.m. the day before your tournament, so that it's in the system. We can download it on the tournament side, and then everybody's good to go. When does the form need to be in? You can send that form in whenever you like. It needs to be in by the tournament. Think 7 p.m. the day before the tournament. It's required to be in. that is when it needs to be in. You can post it or send it at any time, but it's just required to be in by the day before the tournament. And Yasmin, yes, oh yes, I'm recording so that I can upload to YouTube after the fact. So there will be a spot to watch this recording later. When can we start to put in student data? You can do that now, Julie. I believe everybody's tournaments are accessible on the Scilympiad site, so you are able to do it at any point. Okay. I believe so. I'm going back to the head coach dashboard. We've covered everything under student team event assignments, and I've covered the team roster. For Mount Hebron High School regional participants, that was more words than I expected. For students competing at Mount Hebron High School, which are the Eastern Division C teams, there is one other release that you need to sign, or that your students need to sign, and that is found under release forms. So if you're competing at Richard Montgomery or Mount Hebron or the state tournament, if you click on release forms, it'll say there's nothing there. That's part of why I point out the principal certification button, because that is where the sign team roster is. If you are competing at Mount Hebron, there is one additional form that you and your students need to sign. That is accessed under release forms. What happens here is that it gives you a URL. This is tethered to your team. Each team has its own unique URL. You as the coach need to send this to your parent, to your students, your co-coaches, any parents that are going to be on site. Everybody that's at the tournament needs to complete this document. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that and paste it into a different URL and show you that when they add it, they will see this form asking them to submit a form. It is accessed by simply hitting add a member. This is a little bit longer than usual because we broke it down for adults versus minors, but it all says the same thing, basically, that that you won't hold the site liable. Completing it is simply writing your name, clicking sign, and then submitting the form. Once that's done, it is in the system. We are able to see it. You as a coach are able to see it, and I'll show that in a second. But I do want to stress again, for Mount Hebron participants, everybody that's physically at the tournament site needs to complete this form. Please make sure you do that. We obviously can't tell every single person that's going to be on the site until tournament day. We really don't want to have to audit this on tournament day. So please make sure that everybody completes this form ahead of time. And just to show real quick, to actually track who signed this from your team, again, if you have this form, oh, wrong tab. Under the event assignment tab, signed releases, this page will show you who from your team has signed that form that I just showed you. So you as a coach have access to who signed it. And again, it's tethered to that particular URL, so you will know. Are we automatically on the Mount Hebron site? Andy, yes. Every team has been assigned to the correct regional at this point. So you should have access. So once you go to your head coach dashboard and hit release forms, you should see that. So I'm saying this again, I'm repeating myself a little bit, but just making sure the point is hammered home. Everybody needs to sign, every team needs to send a signed team roster. Mount Hebron participants need to do this additional release that's found under release forms. If you have all of that, those are the bare bones for competing at our tournaments this year, regional tournaments at least. So just to kind of complete the head coach dashboard, I've talked about the main functions. Verification checklist, we don't use, so you don't need to worry about that. There's a few guides here. Signups, because we're back on site, we will have self-scheduled event signups, which I have not set up yet, so my apologies, but these will be available soon, where you will be able to sign up for your team's build events. Anything that says sign up on the schedule, which is mostly build events, you'll be able to sign up for a time block. My apologies that I don't have this up. I'm actually writing down that note just to make sure that I get that up, because I should have that up ASAP. You should expect that about 2 weeks before your tournament. So as I look at the calendar, that would be this weekend for Richard Montgomery, and then the Sunday after for Mount Hebron participants. But you'll do that under the self-scheduled event sign-up page. So I'll send out an email blast when that becomes available. And oh, what about Richard? Sorry, you said we need to re-enter student names. Oh, if your student info is there, then that's great, Julie. You're ahead of the game, so no worries about that. Like I said before, just make sure you're on the right site, because if you're on the invitational page, you'll run into a lot of trouble. And what about Richard Montgomery? Are parents allowed on site? I'm not going to answer that question right now because we're solidifying those details. In general, we are stressing minimizing people physically at the tournaments, simply, well, primarily because we're doing this and we're having kids come from around the state. So like I said, I'm not going to answer that right now. Your coaches will have more information relatively shortly. I was hoping to have that out today. I'm just waiting on the okay on the exact policies. Okay, last thing for me to say on head coach dashboard. Oh, sorry, two things. Monitor team competition. This is a neat little tab that you as a coach can use on tournament day. It'll show you where your students are at in their tests, as well as you can actually track the number of answers saved. It'll show you those little check boxes. So this is, again, just a resource for you if you wish to use it. Can be a useful resource. And the last thing to highlight is the online appeal form. We hope that everybody's happy with their tournament experience and you feel that everything is fair, but it is your right, of course, to appeal if you feel that you've been slighted and the rules have not been followed. To do that, simply file a new appeal. And I'll ask for your reason. We are stressing that any appeals need to be rule-based or policy-based. They can't just come from the idea of, I thought we did better. So this is how you'll do it on tournament day if you need to. Ultimately, what I recommend is that you communicate with the tournament personnel before you file an appeal. About 95% of the time, we can resolve an issue before a formal appeal gets filed. The downside to formal appeals is they're usually considered a bit later in the day. And at that point, if there's a remedy that's needed, usually it results in the event being thrown out. So if something happens, talk to tournament staff. Physically on the tournament site, we'll have a headquarters where you'll be able to go to. That's my recommendation. But again, this is your right to be able to appeal. Okay. So I've covered the head coach dashboard. I've covered the majority of head coach functions. Our next step is to move to the student side of the platform. So once again, I will give the chance for any questions about what we've talked about so far. Okay. Well, like I've said before, I will keep going. I'm hoping that nobody else signed up for the seminar. Oh, okay. I need to send a link to somebody who signed up very late. So if you have any questions, I'm going to stop sharing the screen for a moment. Now is a good time to ask them. I will say this is the downside to doing the sign up method as we have it, because if people sign up late, I have to manually send them the link. Okay. That covers that one. Oh, one more. Okay. My apologies for that. All right, let me get back to the Zoom call. Let me get back to sharing my screen. And let's move on to the student portion of the Scilympiad site. So as I've mentioned before, students should not have their own email-based accounts. Students will interact through the site using the login IDs that coaches generate for them through the roster generation part of the site. Once students have their IDs, they will interact through it through the student dashboard or the student login button that's at the top. Either of them kind of take you to the same spot. Most of these buttons are fluff. The main one here is the Take Online Tests Using Login ID button. Before I do that, I need to reference the login ID that I just generated so I can show you how that works. So that's 1037px. Okay. So what's going to happen when you go to this page? It asks by default for a login ID and password, and it's autofilling, and you should ignore that. If your students are here for the first time, they might come to this page and say, where's our password? The reality is that this page, that they don't have a password yet. They will generate it on this page, and that'll happen when they start to input their information. So that student that I showed, that I had before, that has that I just created and is new to the site, I'm going to input their student login ID and then click outside the box. And what you notice is that this page is now turned into a password generation page, simply meaning that the students get to create their password at this point. So that was 9. Let me just make sure I put that down. How this works ultimately is that it requires that the students input the exact first name and last name that was assigned to them on the team roster. This is how we keep other people from just erroneously brute forcing their way into your team's page. I say the exact first name and last name because if you have a nickname or a pseudonym that you use for students, they need to know that for when they interact with this page. But otherwise, they will, like I pointed out before, create a password, confirm the password, put their first name and last name, and then hit sign in. I'm stopping for a second simply to point out that there are password requirements that include lowercase letter, uppercase letter, number, and a special character. That is true of all passwords on this site. But once you have all that information, you'll hit login, and then this is where students will see the events that they've been assigned to. I have not assigned a student to any events, so I'm going to double back here and show you somebody who has been assigned to events so that you get some useful information. So this is what students will see that have been assigned to events. Once before a tournament, all of this information will be populated, showing them time limits, start time, end times. Events that are active, they'll be able, or events that are finalized in the system on our end, they'll be able to click on here so that they can access the event basically. Just to show you, when they click on this event, that does not start the event. It just takes them to an intro page. And I point this out because sometimes the intro pages have useful information that the students will want to know before they start their event. So we do recommend that students check out these pages just to see if there's any information ahead of time. Once you're here and you're ready to start the test, there is a giant start test button, and that'll take you into the testing platform. I think that's all I need to say on this particular page. So the next thing to go to is actually to show you what the testing platform looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and start this student's test for anatomy. So a few things for me to point out on this page. The first thing to point out is this ominous timer that's counting down at the top of the page. How timing works in Scilympiad is that each team is given an individual timer that manages their test. For virtual tests, what we have done in the past is we've given a 60-minute time block and then have the test run for 50 minutes. And what that does is it gives a built-in buffer for the students to be able to access their tests a few minutes late if they have technological issues, say, for example. In person, it will probably run similar. I can't say the exact timings for sure, but that's how it works. I say those points to highlight that the test will end when one of two conditions is met. The first condition is obvious: when this timer hits 0, their test will automatically close. The second condition is if they reach the end of the time block that it's assigned to. So this particular test is assigned to 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. If they were to reach 9 p.m. on the testing day, regardless of how much time is remaining, this test will close at 9 p.m. And they will obviously not be able to re-access it. So I say that because students can access the test at any time during their time block. If they start it before the end of the buffer time, quote unquote, they will get the full test time and it'll be monitored in the system. If they start it late, they will be able to access the test, but it will automatically close at the end of the assigned time block. So please be aware of that. Couple other things to point out. This chat box over here, this becomes a little less relevant in in-person tournaments, but I will just highlight that students can communicate to their partners using this method. If there's not an event supervisor present, this is the way that they will interact with event supervisors through this chat box. They can type messages like, hello, event supervisor, and they'll see that it's a message from their team to the event supervisor. Event supervisors can write back or broadcast messages. Again, a little moot when it's in person, but that's there. And to say that our general policy, if we do end up virtual, knock on wood, like any virtual tournaments, we do not restrict students to just using this chat box. They can communicate through any other means that they so desire. Now that I've jinxed things, let's actually move to the actual testing platform. Using this is really intuitive. The main thing to point out is that noting that whether or not answers are saved. When you're doing multiple choice questions like this one, anytime you click, the answer is saved. Hopefully you can see that there's a flashing yellow box that's indicating that the answer is being saved, and then that transitions to a green answer saved immediately after. For written answers, this saved process is executed manually, meaning I'm just gonna literally type gibberish into this box. This will only save when I click outside the box. Notice when I click outside the box, that's when that yellow message flashes and the answer saved now is shown on the page. This is important because any answers that aren't saved and if the test were to close out, like it's going to do in a minute and a half, those answers will be lost. So students are encouraged to save by clicking outside the box on a periodic basis. Also, only one student should be answering a particular question at a time. And I say that because it's very easy for students to override each other's answers. If I were to type out an answer and save it, and then another student on their page typed out an answer and then tried to save it, it may override the first answer. The students' answers will catch up with each other if you refresh the page, but if you don't know that your teammate has a question answered, it can easily be overwritten. So just be aware of that. And we encourage students to kind of break up who's doing what on the written test. Everything else here is pretty intuitive. Multiple choice I mentioned. Multiple answer, if they're there, it'll be indicated and students will be able to answer multiple questions. We may have images. And once that's done, when they're all finished with their test, they may choose to hit the finish test button. This test will automatically close, like I said, in about 30 seconds. But if they are done with their test, they are able to hit the finish test button. It'll just verify what's happening and they can hit OK. But first, I just want to show real quick. If I close the page by accident, I am still able to get back to it. I can just simply log back in through the student who is taking the test, start the test, and it's still there. So if they accidentally close a page, they're able to get back to it. And sorry for that quick timing, it was about to boot me out. Students will be testing together. Yes, so yes, students will be physically together when they're doing this test. So that's that chat box is a little bit moot altogether when they're together. Okay, for the in-person lab events, will students write their answers on this online test form or on paper? That's a good question, Andy. I would operate under the assumption that the tests are still being run through Scilympiad for regionals. If that changes, we will obviously communicate that to you in particular as an event supervisor, but we'll communicate that to teams as well so that they know they don't have to bring computers for that event. But there are advantages to running through Scilympiad simply because that lowers the paper count and everything is saved on a virtual platform. So right now, even lab events will have students operating on computers and unless otherwise told. And yes, less paper. Okay, I covered a bunch on the student test side. Does anybody have any questions on the general test platform that I showed? The next thing for me to show is a couple of event specifics. But if you have any questions on the general platform, please feel free to ask. Yes, Road Scholar will be on the computer. That is correct, Gene. Really, so for regionals, really the only events that won't be on, the events that won't be on Scilympiad will be anything that's only a hands-on component. So build events, are there any? I'm not thinking of any otherwise offhand. I'm about to go over where to do it, so hang on for 2 seconds. But to Jean's question, I'm not thinking of anything else. Any hands-on components will be hands-on, let's put it that way. Okay. So Yi is of the same mind as me to talk about Ready to Do It. So as I showed before, on this platform, Ready to Do It is broken up into 2 separate events. It is broken up into the writer and the doer components. So what I'm going to do real quick is log into the writer. So what's going to happen basically is this event will probably be, so this event will very likely be run in classrooms, much like we would under non-COVID circumstances, so that we can separate out the writer and the doer. What will happen is that the writer will interact through the writer portion of their writer test. And what I'll show in a minute is that the directions are automatically transferred to the doer when they get to the test. So I'm going to start the writer portion. Because in person, they won't have as many pictures of what the object is. It'll obviously be in front of them. But how we've run it for virtual tournaments is that the image is here. And the main thing is that there is a text box that is provided here where it says something like write your design for the doer. So in this case, I need a fresh new idea. White boat with lots and lots of water. I click outside the box again to save importance. And where the writer's just going to keep writing for their allotted time. When that's done, they're going to finish their test. Then what's going to happen during the doer portion of the time block, the doer is going to log in, which let me get to that real quick. And when they access it and start the test, the partner's writing is automatically transferred to the doer in the Scilympiad platform. So this is how they'll get their directions. And they won't need to do anything with this platform. For in-person tournaments, obviously, they will be building a structure for a supervisor to grade. But this is how they'll get their instructions. And I mean, very briefly, that's how Write It, Do It works. Obviously, the timer will be running. But that's a unique event in the Scilympiad platform. So yeah, hopefully that covers how that works as well as use questions. Ignore the time outside browser. Don't worry about that. One other event for me to show you real quick, it came up in the last seminar, is Codebusters. So we have a question. Yes, it transfers directly on Scilympiad. Very well coded. The gentleman who coded this site put a lot of time and effort into making this work, and we are extremely grateful for it. So I'm going back to the other students. Codebusters is a little unique. Oh, whoops. Oh, gosh darn it. I'm sorry. Give me 2 seconds. I just need to add more time to that team. Again, if you have any questions, now's a good time for it. I thought I did that. Okay. Okay, and now we're back. So the one unique thing to show for Codebusters, well, 2 unique things. The first thing is that the first answer in Codebusters is a timed answer. It's a timed question, meaning that there are bonus points that'll be awarded based on when the answer is correct. In the platform, it doesn't show it here because I restarted the test, apologies, but it'll have a button that lets you check your answer. And when you check your answer, the platform will tell you if it's correct or not. If it is correct, it automatically saves the time at which it was submitted, and any bonus points corresponding to that time are awarded to the team. The other unique thing is simply that saving the answer here is done manually for all cryptographic questions. As you can see, there's a save answer button. Oh, there you go. Correct. Congrats, correct answer. So for the timed question, when you save your answer, it'll tell you whether or not you're right. For all others, it'll just simply say answered saved. But again, just to point out, everything needs to be done manually. And that's a CodeBuster specific function. So those are the unique portions of the Scilympiad testing platform for students. I don't have anything else specific to cover on the student side. Like I noted, students will be able to see, oh gosh, what's 7? Students will be able to see status for all their events. You see that for the students that are done, that it says time's up or submitted. It'll give them an answer count as well. And that's the basics for how students interact with this platform. It's a bit of rinse, lather, repeat from there. Being that we are in person, we'll give details about when and where students will take their tests. And that is a bit event specific. So we'll give information for you as soon as we have it, basically. But that brings me to the end of talking about students and how they interact. Now's a good time if anybody has any questions on either the student side or the coach side, because the next topic to talk about is on the volunteer side. I think too, because we have about 7 minutes before the top of the hour, if you have any general questions about tournaments, this is a decent time to ask that as well. I'll take the moment for the coaches and the students that are still here, just to highlight that we're obviously still processing, exact policies for tournaments. A few things that we know will be stressed are masks for everybody. This is regardless of what the mask mandates in the county say. We are saying we are wearing masks at tournaments. So please make sure that students have appropriate masks. And another important thing is that for Richard Montgomery and the Mount Hebron tournaments, we are requiring students bring computers to use the Scilympiad platform on site. We've checked with a lot of teachers to make sure this is viable. We know that a lot of students have been given laptops by districts over the past, to assist with virtual learning. We hope that that affords the ease and ability for students to have computers on site, but please know that students are expected to bring laptops and computers to the tournament site in order to compete. PCs are better, Andy, from my understanding. Mainly it's the browser with which you interact with the Scilympiad platform. If you have a Mac, I would encourage Chrome instead of Safari. I believe that Safari has some known issues to it. And Chromebooks, I believe Chromebooks are fine because we're just working through a web-based platform as long as they're able to access the site. I don't believe that there are any coding issues that inhibit their ability to take the tests. If you're a volunteer, Chromebooks have their drawbacks, but I believe the students should be okay on that. Julie, yes, there will be homerooms. So I'll say this now because we announced it for Mount Hebron. Mount Hebron, the homerooms are a little different. They are actually taking the written test in a second homeroom. So each team's being given 2 rooms where the second one is where they're taking their tests. You at Richard Montgomery will have standard homerooms, like the last time we were in person. So that part will be normal for you. That is a longer answer to the question that you asked. This is where the different tournaments are taking slightly different policies to make it safe for the students this year. Anything else I can mention in general about tournaments? We have 2 teams. Will the homeroom be a bigger space for us? We account for that, Yi. And Jean, you were all in the cafeteria last time. Sorry, Yi, yes, we account for homeroom space based on number of teams. And Jean, yes, you were all in the cafeteria last time. Homeroom assignments being taken care of by Richard Montgomery, Lissa Vincent's the tournament director, as well as their tournament planning staff. So I don't have exactly what the assignments are just yet. They're handling those logistics now, and we'll have that to you obviously as soon as possible. Julie, 15 kids per team. Yes, all 15 are absolutely able to participate. I believe there's actually a rule in Science Olympiad. You can't do more than 6 events on a tournament day, but the way that the time blocks work out, it would be a masterful feat to compete in more than 6 events in a day anyways. So our policy is that you are allowed to have up to 5 alternates on your team, and those alternates are allowed to compete in trial events. So for Richard Montgomery, we have Fast Facts scheduled as a trial event. I can't say that, Fast Facts. We have Fast Facts scheduled as a trial event that alternates are eligible to compete in. Otherwise, alternates are allowed to take the place of one of the 15 main team members if one of the 15 drops out. There are caveats to that, but that's how the team structure works. Okay. Any last questions for the top of the hour? And I move to the event supervisor side. Okay. So like I said, going to transition into the volunteer side. I'll say in general, we are strongly encouraging teams to volunteer or to provide volunteers from your teams and your co-coaches this year. It helps us to keep numbers down in the buildings if co-coaches are also volunteering to help with events. And especially since we're bringing back build events, we do have a need for hands to run those events. So we encourage teams to please try to provide volunteers if you're able. If you have questions, reach out to me or sign up on the Sign Up Genius, and you can ask us to reach out to you as well. But ultimately, it's only because of our amazing volunteers who help us run these tournaments that we're able to do as much as we do. So I'm going to now walk you through what the volunteer side of this site looks like. And if you've been following along so far, you kind of have seen how the student tests are made or are presented. We're going to go into how they're made now. So if you're an event supervisor, you'll have an ES or an event supervisor tab up at the top of the page. I should say real quick, all volunteers need to create accounts on the Scilympiad site. If you don't have an account, when you hit login, you can hit new member and it'll ask you to create an account. If you're volunteering, you should create an event supervisor account, even if you're a lead on an event or not. We have to change your role to assign you to an event if you're a different account type. If specifically if you sign up as other, that's problematic. So if you're a volunteer, sign up as event supervisor. If you have a coach account already, then you're set. You're in the system, and we can assign you to your events. This is primarily for volunteers who are not coaches. Going back, ES tab is up here at the top, and this will take you to the event supervisor dashboard. And I'm making sure I don't have any questions. Okay, that's irrelevant, sorry. Let's walk you through how we look at and prepare tests on the Scilympiad platform. Let's get out of code busters. That one's boring. So how you interact with the test itself is under Create, Update, Online Tests. If you are creating a test on this platform, this page will be blank. Most likely you will have a test here and present, and I should not be showing that test, sorry. We want this one. Okay. Just to show you, there's some very intuitive buttons on this page here. This pencil button lets you make changes to the test. The questions button takes you straight to the Manage Questions page. And I'll show you both in a second. This eyeball lets you see the student version, which we encourage as you program it, so that you see what the students see. You can view it with the key by hitting the key button. This classroom and this classroom button refers to on test day. I'll come back to that. If you need to somehow move the test, this is how you copy it. Please don't delete a test without telling us first. But otherwise, this is a pretty intuitive page. Let's actually jump into the pencil button. This takes you to kind of the setup page where this lets you put instructions, introduction, and conclusion. Instructions are what the students see before they start the test. if you saw the student, the part of this where I showed how the students access their test, they are able to access their instructions before they start the event. So if you have any information for them, such as maybe a Dropbox that you are having them upload files to, that is a good place to put it so that they have it before the event starts. Introduction, this is what the students see at the top of the page when they start the test. So any needed information that they need to see is there. There are ways to format text boxes as you go, so you can choose which formatting you want to use, but that is what introduction is for. And then conclusion is what they see when they leave the test. In particular, as I mentioned, if there is a Dropbox for them to upload files to, we recommend you put that Dropbox in the conclusion as well, so that they can potentially upload after the fact. This might all be moot to say for in-person tournaments. I've been giving this seminar for virtual tournaments for so long that I haven't fully adapted everything just yet. But needless to say, this is what shows up when the student's test ends. If you go to manage questions, sorry, it gave me a notification for some reason. Manage questions, this is where the bulk of the test is. Adding questions is rather intuitive. Add new question. Just to show you what's on this page, each question has another pencil next to it that lets you edit the question. There is also little arrows that go up or down so that you can move each question up or down one slot. There is a much easier way to do this through the list order, which I will show you how to assign when we actually add a question. The list order, real quick, is an arbitrary number sequence that the platform uses to organize the questions in the test. So it'll go from 1 to it'll increase in value. And so if you had a question that's higher in value than 210, it would automatically get put beyond this question in the platform. Let's actually jump into the questions because that'll cover everything else we're talking about. So in adding a question, we have a few question types that we can consider using. Multiple choice, true, false, really intuitive what that refers to. Multiple answers is multiple choice questions where there are multiple possible answers. I'm going to say up front, if you're doing a multiple answers question, please have your question have more than one answer. The reason for that is that this platform has a funky, not funky, I shouldn't say, but it has an algorithm for how it scores multiple answers. And the short of it is that if you have only one correct answer possible, any incorrect answer that a student gives will drop their score on the question to 0. And we consider that a bit unfair. So if you have multiple answers, please make sure your question actually has multiple answers on the question. Otherwise, the student scores will drop on them very quickly. Fill in the blank. This is what it sounds like, where students can fill in a blank and it'll automatically match answers to what you program it to check it to. We strongly encourage that you don't use this if you're creating tests, because it does not account for things like syntax, spelling errors, slang, or acronyms. Basically, it only gives it gives a brute force pass if the students have written a correct answer. And if not, it will mark it wrong. And although you are able to go through and audit any question on the test, it sets it up where it is easy to miss, basically. And it falls on you as the event supervisor to really do a lot of work that can be more confusing than it needs to be. That's all to say, if you have a question where you want students to write an answer, please use the short answer essay function, and it'll automatically prompt you to grade it every time. Cryptography, that is only relevant to Codebusters. So if you're not writing that, don't worry about it. And then text block, this allows you to format giving information. And we encourage you to use it as much as you like. You can format your test any way you want, but feel free to use the text blocks to give information. So let's actually talk about writing questions. Multiple choice, obviously this is straightforward. You write a question, write possible answers. There are a maximum 6 possible choices given to the students. If you don't write anything in one of these boxes, it does not show the box. So you can either have 6 possible answers or any number fewer than that. The mandatory thing you do is that you mark one of the answers correct. And I'll just literally write answer 1, answer 2. You can do a little bit of formatting on here, superscripts, subscripts. You can put different fonts, different colors. When you're actually writing the question, it gives you a few more options, like writing tables, for example. And apart from that, hopefully this is really straightforward how you actually write these questions. As always, when you're done, you hit Save Changes. Please don't navigate away from the page unless you hit Save Changes. But before we do, let me just walk you through what else is at the top of the page here. So we've talked about question type. Category, we don't use in this platform, and it has caused more problems than it's solved. So we recommend you leave the category alone. Points, this is the number of points the question is worth. It can be 1 to 999, I think, or probably more. But don't put 999, please. Just put however many points you want it to be. Difficulty level, we don't use that, so don't worry about it. List order, this is what I mentioned before about how the test is actually ordered in Scilympiad. This, when you add a question, it'll automatically assume you wanted the question at the end of the test, and it'll give a very high list order number. But you are able to change this to any value you want at any time. So please feel free to use that formatting when you're writing your test to move questions around freely. Tie order. One funny quirk about Scilympiad is that there are no ties allowed ever. If there are ties in any test, it must be broken. The easiest way to do this is to write your test with designated tiebreaker questions in mind. Any question can be a tiebreaker. We recommend you pick something meaningful, and ideally something that, like, a written answer question is more meaningful because it typically has a range of points and partial points possible. But on the test platform side, to assign a question as a tiebreaker, you just simply put which tiebreaker number you want this to be. So for example, if you want this question to be the first tiebreaker, you put number 1. And when the end of the test comes and if the scores are tied, the platform will automatically try to break the tie using this question. Please feel free to have multiple tiebreakers. It makes your life easier if the platform automatically tries to break ties. So feel free to use that. This skip button, this is really only relevant if on tournament day you are throwing out a question. We recommend on tournament day you don't delete off this platform. You just, if need be, you will simply hit the skip button. This should not be done unilaterally. If you need to skip a question or feel like a question should be dropped, you should consult with the tournament staff before you do that. And then the last thing just to show, there's some basic programming you can use to make things look fancy. You don't have to use this. Usually the superscripts and subscripts cover most of what you'll need to have in your question. So really that covers writing questions on the test. You'll do that obviously ad nauseum until you're done with the test. And if I go back to the question list, then that will be the bulk of your test. On the screen again, you can view the student version, what they see. We recommend you check this periodically to make sure the formatting matches what you expect. Hopefully that's an obvious thing to say. And the only other thing for me to point out on this page, if you happen to be writing Codebusters, you'll set the timed question using that button and hit turn on timed question. If you're not running Codebusters, don't worry about it. So I have covered talking about writing tests in the platform. If you have any questions about this, now would be the time to ask. I don't know if we have too many test writers left in the call, but obviously please feel free to keep typing. While that is happening, I'm going to go and show you how to grade test in the platform. So let me go back to Event Supervisor. So under Getting Ready, we've talked about grade online tests. You really won't use any of these other buttons. There's a resource for Event Supervisors if you wish, that's there. Otherwise, I'm going to move to Competition Day. So on Competition Day, there are two main functions you will use. You will mainly use one of them in person. So what I would normally say for a virtual tournament is that there are two important functions to look at: the classroom and the grade online tests. The classroom refers to what I showed before about having a chat box with your students. This is obviously necessary for virtual tournaments, because on a virtual test, this is the only mechanism that students have to interact with volunteers. In an in-person tournament, this is a bit moot. You probably won't need to be monitoring this. So just be aware that this is here, that's what this is. And if you're at an in-person tournament, you won't need to look at this. However, if you're volunteering at Morgan State, where they are running virtual tests on a purely virtual format, every event supervisor or somebody from each event should be monitoring this chat. How this chat works, you can see the message that was sent by a team. To write back to that team, you have a couple options. To write to that team, we can write out a message, hello B1, corresponding to the team number. You can click the message sent to you, and that'll bring up this to B01 only button to let you message just that team. You can click over on the left here, the team number as well, and it'll bring up the same thing. And you can send the message where it says ES to B01, meaning it's from the supervisor to B01. This does not distinguish between volunteers on a test. So if you have multiple volunteers working in the same chat box, it'll just come up under the same ES moniker. If you wish to broadcast a message, it's in all caps, but we're going to broadcast a hello everyone, and it says ES to all. So it's very easy to track where messages have come from and where they're going to. Again, for virtual tests, this is the only way students can interact with supervisors and volunteers. So please, for virtual tournaments, make sure you're monitoring this chat box. Everybody will want to know about the Grade Online Test button because that is relevant to all tests. So, oh no, it's locked me out. Why has that locked me out? Okay, while I mentally figure that out, this page will summarize the status of all tests as they're occurring in Scilympiad. This is a great screen to monitor during the test because you can see the progress of all the students as they go, how long they've been in the test, what their duration is, how many questions they've answered. It'll also show just simply how many students have accessed this test. When the test is done, normally there is a grade now button on here, which I need to figure out how to bring back because that should be there. And that's how you access the test to grade it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2 seconds to see if I can't force that through. Now's a good time. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. What I might need to do, go back. No, they're done. Their time ran out. That's an odd one. So just to reassure everybody, I have reused this particular tournament various times for these seminars. So what might be happening is just simply a blip because I've gone through and done it multiple times. What I'm going to do, let's let them reopen the test. Let's close it out properly. Okay, so they're back on the test, start the test, finish the test. And if we go back to the Grade Online Tests. Okay, I am very sorry about that. This does not want me to grade it. So I'm going to go to a different event. There we go. Okay, this is what you'll see is a green grade this button. That lets you grade the test. This does not show all the question types like I had planned because this platform decided not to let me do it. But you'll get the basics of what you'll see here, where this platform will try to automatically grade as many questions as it can. Multiple choice, true, false, multiple answer questions, as well as fill in the blank, but we talked about that before. All those question types, the system will automatically try to grade. And what'll happen is you see this key at the top. It'll award as whatever, it'll give it whatever symbol is possible here in the top left. And like I said, just try to auto grade it. If there's an open-ended question, the platform will either automatically assume it needs manual grading or it'll say it was skipped. More often than not, you'll see that it says it needs manual grading. How you award points in any question for any question type is that you'll have a points box where you'll be able to type in a number and then hit save points. this is going to give me an error message because I've programmed this question as 0 points. But normally what will happen is that'll save. And usually this will actually update corresponding to the number of points you gave the question. So if I told the platform basically this was wrong, it'll then update and say that the student gave a wrong answer, or whatever is relevant to the situation. You always have the ability to override what the system awards. Use that power wisely. And in particular, please make sure you're auditing how the platform is grading answers to make sure it's doing it correctly. But grading is as straightforward as going through, awarding the number of points based on the student's answers. A pitfall to this is that you don't have the ability to put notes in this particular part of the answer. I will show you in a couple minutes where you're able to put notes for the score room. But for now, try to be as consistent as possible, kind of be able to talk about your methodology of how you graded answers. And yeah, apart from that, like I said, you'll go through one by one, grade these tests. When you're done, you'll hit done grading, and this screen will transition to be a green bar, which means that it's been graded. You are able to re-access it through the pencil button, but ultimately your goal is to have everything be a green bar here and everything be graded. A couple quick notes on grading methodology, and then I'll open it up for some questions. First off, as I mentioned with the student side, there is the ability to override other volunteers working on these tests. We encourage typically that only one volunteer or event supervisor access the test for grading at a time, so you don't override each other's answers. Also, we encourage what's called horizontal grading. Horizontal grading basically means that you assign a certain range or certain questions to be graded by the same grader for all tests. And what that does is it means that every particular question is graded consistently because it's graded by the same person. This also helps you keep from overriding each other's answers and each other's work, which is equally important. But from a fairness standpoint, it is fair for students to be evaluated similarly when writing open-ended questions. And so we encourage, when you go to score your test, that you have a plan with your volunteers of who is grading what. So I've talked for a bit and I need a drink of water, but it is also a good spot to ask if anybody has any questions. Oh, Yasmin, you had asked a while ago when this is going to be available. Probably think tomorrow. It takes a little while to upload this to YouTube. I don't even know if Yasmin's still here, so apologies. Okay. Seeing no more questions, we have talked about how to grade online tests. And now we move on from grading online tests to confirming everything. Question: can you send out the YouTube link? Yes, I will happily do that. Writing a note for myself. Okay, no problemo. Okay, once you've graded all online tests, you're gonna go to the event scoring tab. You being event supervisor, we recommend volunteers be a part of this as well. On the event scoring page, every test that you've graded will translate through to this page, and you'll see that the scores should be populated. Even if not, and this is relevant for some build events, you are simply able to input the scores or modify what's on this screen. So for the sake of showing something, I will input scores for a couple of different teams. In particular, I'm going to put two teams with the same score to show what the consequence of that is. And that is a eye blinding yellow highlighting these two team scores. I mentioned before, there are no ties allowed in Scilympiad. So you'll need to break this tie through either signed tiebreakers, or if you still have ties even after those, it is basically your job as event supervisor to come up with a tiebreaker. When you're done breaking the tie, you'll come here and modify the score through one of two ways. The simplest way is to give a small fraction of the score to the team that wins the tie. You can put it in the tiebreaker column as well. whichever works for you. Usually if it's 5.01, we know what happened. And then you can hit save changes. And that obviously breaks the tie. What you want to do on this screen is give a first order check of the scores. So make sure that you can put it into rank order by hit show ranking. Just kind of check to make sure that this adds up. If a team did not participate, you can hit this completed button and it'll bring up a drop-down menu that lets you change to participate, no show. Disqualified is very, very rare. If you are thinking of disqualifying a team, come and talk to us, please, in the tournament staff. But participate and no show are both possible. You can input those there. Sorry, let me put this back in. Show ranking, again, verify that this makes sense. If you want to put any notes for any particular team, this does give the ability to do it here. So if there's anything that should be considered for whatever reason, you can put a note here. Save changes. And then the last thing to do is go to checkout. This checkout screen is what you will see when you go to score counseling. These are literally the same questions that you'll get from the score counselor. And we encourage / really want you to go through and do this before we get to score counseling. This will basically have you walk through and audit your test. Some of these are literally asking, did you grade the test? And hopefully that answer is yes. And then some of these are, have you validated, multiple choice, true, false questions, just to make sure everything looks good. This is the point at which you're literally double checking your work, double checking the platform did everything right. This will take a couple minutes. And we encourage that you plan time for this, and that we rely on you obviously to give accurate scores so that we can award our students appropriately. So please give a little bit of time for this and just go through this when you're done grading. If you have any other notes to put, especially about tiebreakers, this is the spot to put it. Unfortunately, it's like one of the last steps to put the notes, but please use this box freely so that when tournament staff pick this event up, say the day later, and we're like, what the hell happened? We have notes that can help to describe what happened. But in this case, we can say no ties or tiebreaker with something, blah, blah, blah. Enter your name and then submit it. Once that's submitted, the job is mostly done, except for score counseling. Event supervisors need to go through score counseling to finalize their scores. So what will happen in a virtual tournament, we have a virtual room for score counseling. At an in-person tournament, we have a physical space to go and be score counseled. And that is the last step for event supervisors. Let me go through that real quick. So this is the ScoreMaster dashboard. And I bring this up because I just want to literally show you what the event supervisor will bring up. The ScoreMaster will bring up. And ultimately, they're going to bring up the same screen that what you were looking at. I brought up the wrong screen, sorry. This is what we were looking at before. They will bring up the same event, the same information that the event supervisor put in. There is a very solid chance they will ask the same questions. They will verify everything with you. Sorry, hit the wrong button. They will verify everything with you that you went through. If you've gone through all the checks, this will be very quick. They will bring up the same screen that you had submitted before. They will probably go through and still audit one or two things just to make sure everything makes sense from the score room side. But then once that's complete, they will hit this event is good to go, lock the scores, and then the event is done from the event supervisor standpoint. Once the scores have been submitted, we will ask you to leave a cell phone on file in case we have any questions, or if we have any appeals. Event supervisors need to get feedback towards that. But basically, once you're at this point, your job is done, and we will thank you. And if you're in person, we will hopefully still have some food left over for you. And that is basically the job of the event supervisor. I feel like the dismount was not good on this one, but that is what I have to say about volunteering. We talked about event supervisors volunteering in on the platform in general. And I'll just show you real quick what I call the victory button. And we use this even at in-person, where once all the scores have been locked, we have a victory button where we lock all scores and it save changes. And that locks everything, and that's when we throw a party, basically, because the scoring room is done as well. Okay. In about half an hour, I've covered talking about how tests are written, how tests are graded, what at least a virtual tournament is like managing in the platform, and then finalizing scores and score counseling. That's a lot for me to talk about. Now's the chance, if you have any questions on any of those, please ask. After kind of this line of questioning, I'll talk about what this might look like at our in-person tournaments. Yes, Andy, it's literally from when I started recording at 7:07 until now, yes. Okay. So really the last thing for me to talk about in a formal seminar sense is new, basically, because we are transitioning to using this platform at in-person tournaments. So some of the things I talked about from the volunteer side are a little bit different. The chat box, for example, we haven't decided whether or not we're removing it, but there is a very realistic chance we'll remove it because you as a volunteer or an event supervisor will be in the room to answer questions. You will still need a computer to interact with this environment because the students are uploading their tests virtually. So you as an event supervisor or a volunteer should anticipate having a computer as well as the kids. What else do I need to say? Apart from that, oh, I'm sorry, that is not entirely true. This is where the tournaments differ. Richard Montgomery tournament. This is where most event supervisors will be in the room with students. So what I just said holds true. The chat boxes will probably be disabled and they can ask you questions. At the Mount Hebron tournament, we are doing things slightly differently where the written tests are being done where the kids are in their home rooms. In that case, event supervisors and volunteers, we will give you a space in the media center for you to bring your computers and to interact in a fully virtual, in a basically virtual environment. You will need to access the classroom, and like I mentioned before, because you will not be in the room with the students. So that part still holds, that you will need to be monitoring the chat room. Like I said before, the Grade Online Tests is a great place to be to monitor. I don't know why this didn't show anything. It's a great place to be monitoring while the test is running, just to see how it's going. But just keep that in mind. So again, this is where things start to diverge a little bit. You'll be given specific information and instructions in either case about what's happening, where you'll go for things like score counseling, how you'll be able to interact with the tournament staff. Chances are you will be able to interact with tournament staff quite readily. It'll just be the communication with the students that differs. I'm going to stop making general statements on this front because clearly things are a little different by each tournament. But just keep in mind that in-person tournaments, because we're running through Scilympiad, it may look a little different than exactly what we talked about, but it'll be very, very similar. Okay. So, like I said, I've covered the volunteer side. Does anybody have any questions on the event supervisor volunteer side? And what I'm going to do ultimately in a minute or so is end the recording, and then we can talk about anything that you guys want. So Andy's question, at Mount Hebron lab like forensic science, you will be in a room with the students because they need to be hands-on with material to run that event. So you will be in a room with the students. They're like we asked before, like you had asked before, they'll be on their computers interacting with their tests. Their flames will not be giant, but still be prevalent so they can do the event. Yes, so in that case, basically what I said would hold true. We'd probably disable the chat box so that they would interact with you in person. Okay. I think what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to end the recording, but we're going to keep talking. And I'm obviously here to answer any questions. But for everybody that's watching, Just thank you all so much for all that you do for Science Olympiad. This is turning out, this is setting up to be an exciting year. If you're on the team side, good luck with your competition. If you're a volunteer, thank you so much for all that you do. And my name is Robert Bruce. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And thank you all so much. And